Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Routes Learning Series for Train Simulator. On today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Berlin to Leipzig route in Germany, and I'm going to be driving a scenario which takes us on a full run of the route between Berlin Gesundbrunnen station and Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. The total distance for the journey is around 173 kilometers, or around 108 miles, and the intermediate stops along the way will be at Berlin Hauptbahnhof, Berlin Sudkreuz, and Lutherstadt Wittenberg. The scenario that I'm using is called 1A Herbslaub, and the train that I'm going to be driving is a double-length ICE2 set, so it's two ICE2 units connected together, with each ICE2 unit formed of one locomotive and one driving car known as a Stauerwagen. So the ICE2 was manufactured by Adtranz and Siemens between 1995 and 1997, with refurbishment happening between 2010 and 2013. There were a total of 46 of these units built, formed of one power car with 7 coaches, and a maximum capacity of 391 seats. The ICE2 is operated by the German Deutsche Bahn, and they have a maximum speed of 174 miles per hour, or 280 kilometers per hour. Each unit weighs 412 tons, and they have a maximum power output of 6,400 horsepower, or 4,800 kilowatts, running on the 15 kilovolt 16.7 Hz AC overhead electrification system. Now that I'm in the cab of the front locomotive on this train, I'm just going to go through the setup procedure very quickly. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go into forward by pressing the W key. Now that I've done that, I'm going to turn on the headlights by pressing the H key. And now that I've done that, I'm going to turn on the safety systems. So to turn on the PZB and LZB signalling system, I need to press Ctrl and numpad enter. And now you can see there's a blue 85 lamp that is illuminated in the middle of the dashboard. If I just zoom in, you should be able to read that more clearly. And so the 85 there indicates that it's set up as a passenger train with higher acceleration and braking rates. Therefore, I can approach adverse signals at higher speeds than if it was, say, reading 70 or 55. The next safety system I'm now going to turn on is the CIFA system by pressing Shift and numpad enter. And now that I've done that, I'm going to turn on the AFB control, which is the speed set cruise control. So you can see there on the right hand side the speedometer measured in kilometers per hour with a small red bug on the outside of it. RFB. So if I now press the Y key, RFB. You now see that that's climbing, and if I now leave that at 90 kilometers per hour with the digital readout in the middle of the speedometer there, then the train will not exceed 90 kilometers per hour, and that will be the maximum speed limit between here and our next stop at Berlin's Hauptbahnhof station. So just to have a quick look at some of the controls here, we've got the AFB lever there on the left hand side, and also the throttle control, which you can see is the right of the two levers. In the ICE2 we've got a smooth controlled throttle, so I can adjust the power settings incrementally without it being notched. Now if we move over to this side of the cab, I have the brake handle there. So if I release the brakes, then I push the handle away from me, and then to apply the brakes you pull the handle back towards you. And so if I'm just going through the brakes there, we've got 6 brake settings before the emergency setting, which is step 7. And I'm just going to quickly demonstrate the horn in this train by pressing the spacebar key. And now that I've done that, we've pretty much looked around the cab for now at everything that I need to. I'm not going to go into huge detail on the German signalling system because, as many of you are probably aware, I have made a full tutorial on the German signalling system already. And I'm going to post a link to that tutorial in the description of this video, should you like to learn the signalling system in more detail. So now that we've had a look around the cab and had a look at some of the basic controls, let's just take another look at the train itself, and then we can depart and head out towards Berlin Hauptbahnhof and ultimately Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. Departing Berlin Gesundbrunnen, the starting speed limit is 90 kilometers per hour, as the 90 kilometer per hour speed limit is coming into force on this signal, and you can tell that because of the number 9 above the signal there. And at this point we've got 4.8 kilometers, or around 3 miles to go to our next stop, which is Berlin Hauptbahnhof. At this point I'm just accelerating up to the 90 km per hour speed limit, and then at the next signal I'm going to need to acknowledge a PZB alarm, and that's because there will be a speed limit coming into force at the following signal. So at the next signal I'm going to get a warning of an upcoming 60 km per hour speed restriction. I'm going to have to slow down to 60 in time for the next signal. Now got the warning for the upcoming 60 km per hour speed limit. I've immediately idled the power. Now I'm just going to brake lightly to start bringing our speed down in time for the 60. One of the things I found with the German signalling system in Train Simulator is that even if I'm going to slow down quick enough for a certain speed limiter to signal, sometimes the system calculates that I'm not going to and applies the emergency brakes anyway, which is a bit of a pain. So I find that when there's a signal speed limit coming into force, then at that point I usually slow down a bit too early just to try and ensure that I don't get the emergency brakes triggered on the train. So we're now down to 60 kilometers per hour, and I've set the AFB control down to 60 to ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limits. At this point we're now at the start of a long steep downhill section, and so I've just idled the power at this point. I'm just going to allow the train to control our speed and ensure that we don't end up breaking the speed limit. Coming up very shortly we're going to be entering a tunnel, and then shortly after entering the tunnel then we're going to head into Berlin's Hauptbahnhof station. I say Hauptbahnhof station, but Hauptbahnhof is actually Central Station. So just realising that as I say that, I'm actually saying the Central Station, which doesn't quite make sense. I have recently been trying to do some German lessons, and I've been finding it quite interesting, and I'm hoping that it helps me with some of the pronunciations on this journey today of the various place names that we travel through. So we're now coming into Hauptbahnhof. We're now crossing a junction, and then very shortly the platform's going to be coming into view, and so I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just as we cross this next point here. I'm going to have to brake quite hard simply because we are on this downhill grade, and it is going to affect our ability to slow down. As this is a double length ICE2 set, I'm aiming to stop right near the end of the platform, as this platform is long enough to accommodate a full double length train. I was slowing down just slightly too early there, so I've just released the brakes, and now I'm just braking lightly to slow us down for the stopping point at the end of the platform. And so I believe this should be about the right place to stop. Departing Berlin Hauptbahnhof, the starting speed limit is still 60 kilometers per hour, and at this point we've got around 5.6 kilometers to go, which is I believe around 3.5 miles to go to our next stop, which is Berlin Sudkreuz. Travelling through this tunnel now, we're still going to be stuck at a 60 km per hour speed limit for about another minute or so, and then as we approach the next signal, the speed limit then doubles to 120 km per hour, or around 75 miles per hour. So we've just reached the next signal here, and I'm now going to start accelerating up towards the new speed limit of 120 kilometers per hour. To do that, I'm just going to cut the power handle back to ensure that we don't jolt the passengers too much. I've now increased the speed set to 120, and I've gone into full power to start accelerating up towards that speed limit. We're now passing Berlin Potsdamer Platz. We will shortly be reaching the end of this tunnel, and once we do reach the end of the tunnel, we've then got around 2.6 kilometers to go to our next stop. So we have now reached the end of the tunnel with 2.6 kilometers to go. At the next signal, I'm going to have to acknowledge a PZB warning, as we will have an upcoming 70 km per hour speed limit at the following signal. You can now see there's a flashing green light just ahead, which is the signal where I've got to acknowledge the PZB. So at this point I have now just idled the power to allow the train to coast. I've now acknowledged the PZB alarm, and I'm now braking for the upcoming 70 km per hour speed limit. I'm braking quite hard and probably a bit too early again, because as already mentioned, if I don't brake quick enough, then there's a chance that the system will calculate I'm not going to slow down in time and apply the emergency brakes. So we're now doing a comfortable 70 kilometers per hour. I've just moved the speed set system down to 70 to ensure that we don't break that speed limit. I gave us a small amount of power for a moment there to try and ensure we don't slow down too quickly, but I can now see Berlin Sudkreuz station coming up, so I've now idled the power to allow the train to coast. Now applying the brakes to bring our speed down as we enter the platform. Once again, due to the length of this train, I am aiming to stop near the end of the platform. So I have just been slowing down quite gently there with very light brake application, and I'm just pulling up a little bit further towards the end. I'm aiming to stop just before the signal here. So this should be about the right place to stop. Departing from Berlin Sudkreuz, the starting speed limit is 80 kilometers per hour, and at this point we've got 91 kilometers to go, which is around 56 to 57 miles to go to our next stop, which is Lutherstadt Wittenberg. So I just increased the speed set there to 120, then remembered that the starting speed limit was actually 80 kilometers per hour. The speed limit is going up further to 120 kilometers per hour as we approach the next signal. So just as we've passed the next signal, I can then be sure that the whole train has cleared the section and we're able to start accelerating up towards the new speed limit. You can see the signal is just coming up ahead now. Now we've passed the signal, I've now increased the speed set to 120 kilometers per hour, and so we're accelerating up towards that now. The speed limit is now going up to 140 kilometers per hour. We've just passed the speed post there, and so I can accelerate towards that just as we've passed this signal here. Now past the signal and I've just increased the speed set to 140. We're now passing Sudkreuz S-Bahn platform, and the speed limit in a moment will be going up to 160 kilometers per hour as we enter LZB signalling. So now that we've entered LZB signalling, I've just increased the speed set to its highest setting, the lever there, because all of our speed changes will now be managed by the computer system. So I actually won't need to accelerate or brake for any speed limit changes. The train will do that entirely by itself. The only time I'm going to need to intervene is when stopping at stations. I'd just like to apologise for the lag on this route. Unfortunately, this route is quite demanding on the system, and even with my PC, which is pretty high spec, I still do struggle with lag issues on this route. We're now passing Berlin Lichterfelde. At Berlin Lichterfelde station, we had 85 kilometers to go to our next stop. For now, we're continuing to follow the Berlin S-Bahn on the right-hand side, so the Two tracks to our right are part of the local railway system in Berlin. The speed limit has now just jumped up to 200 kilometers per hour, or 125 miles per hour, with more than 9.9 kilometers to go to the next speed change. Hence the display in between to the left of the speedometer, should I say, on the cab is currently not registering that there's any speed changes on there, as it only detects speed changes up to 9.9 kilometers ahead. We're now passing Telltale Station. .200 kilometers per hour is the highest speed limit that we're going to encounter on this journey today, so we are now at our full cruising speed, and 200 kilometers per hour is around 125 miles per hour. We're now passing Grossbarren Yard on the left-hand side, and the next station that we pass is Grossbarren Station. We're now passing Grossbarren Station. Diverging to the right at this point is the loop to Berlin Airport. We're now passing Birkengrün Station with 72 kilometers to go. We're now passing Ludwigsfelde. We're now passing Thyrau station. We're now passing Strebin station. And at the next station that we pass, which is Woltersdorf, we then have around 48.5 kilometers or 30 miles to go to our next stop. We're now coming up on Woltersdorf. So as I already mentioned, we've now got around 30 miles to go to Lutherstadt Wittenberg. We're now passing Luckenwalde station. We're now coming up on Boggs station with 32 kilometers or 20 miles to go to Lutherstadt Wittenberg. We're now passing Niedergoersdorf station. We're now passing Blonsdorf station. At this point we've now got around 19 kilometers to go to our next stop. We're now passing Klebitz station with 15.7 kilometers to go. The LZB system has now activated, indicating there will be a speed change to 160 kilometers per hour, now in under 10 kilometers. So we're currently just around 9 kilometers away from that. And as we get close to that speed change, the train will start braking itself and slow down for that speed limit in time. We're now coming up on Zahner station with 10.5 kilometers to go to Lutherstadt Wittenberg. So when the speed change comes into force, we've then got around 2.2 kilometers to go to our upcoming stop. And and I will apply the brakes shortly after we have slowed down for the 160 km/h or 100 mph speed limit. We're now passing Leipzig station with 7.2 kilometers to go to our stop. We're now passing Zoenigal with 5.5 kilometers to go, and in a moment the train will start braking for the upcoming 160 km/h speed limit. As the train starts braking, I'm going to idle the power and I'm just going to allow the train to coast once we reach that speed, so that we don't accelerate any further, as we do need to slow down for our stop. The train is now starting to brake for the upcoming 160 km/h speed limit. I've now pulled the power handle back into the idle position as the train begins to slow down. Apologies for the rather extreme lag there. Hopefully it seems to have calmed down a bit for a moment. So we are now down to 160 km/h, and as we approach the next point, I am then going to start applying the brakes to slow down for our stop. Just crossing the point now. I've now made a step 4 brake application, which should bring our speed down quite nicely. I will increase the braking if necessary to ensure that we do stop at the station in time. Certainly quite a lot of lag as we come into Lutherstadt Wittenberg here, so I do apologise for that. I don't know what it is with some routes in Train Simulator, but some routes are really recordable where I can record with very little lag, and other routes have some quite extreme lag as you're trying to record a video on them. Lag which isn't present in fact when I'm just playing the route normally. So I have just increased the braking slightly to ensure that we are slowing down in time. As always, I'm aiming to stop at the end of the platform here. And so this should be about the right place to stop. Departing Lutherstadt Wittenberg, the starting speed limit is 160 kilometers per hour, though that speed limit will soon be increasing to 200 kilometers per hour. And at this point we've got around 71 kilometers, which is around 44 to 45 miles to go to our next and final stop, which is Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. We're now at the speed limit of 160 kilometers per hour, and in a moment the speed limit is going to jump to 200 kilometers per hour. The speed limit just changed now, so we're now accelerating up towards that, and we're now passing Prater station. We're now coming up on Bergwitz station with around 60 kilometers to go. We're now coming up on Radies station. We're now coming up on Greifenhainischen station with around 48 kilometres or 30 miles to go. A 100 km/h speed limit has now come into force on the LZB system, so we've now got less than 10 km to go to the next speed change. We're now coming up on Berg Chemnitz station, and then we've got one more station to go through at Muldenstein, and then at that point, just after that station I think it is, the train will start braking for the 100 km/h speed restriction once we're around 2.5 km away from the speed restriction. We're actually going to be crossing over onto the left-hand track, and we're going to be driving on the left-hand track for a few kilometres to allow us to overtake a slower train. I'm not sure if this is something that would happen in real life in Germany, so I don't know if that's prototypical or not, but that's the way the scenario has been set up. If you do know whether this is something that would normally happen in Germany, then please do let me know in the comments, as I'm interested to know if this is something that compares with reality or not. We are now passing Muldenstein station. The train has now started to brake for the upcoming 100 km/h speed limit. So we should brake now quite smoothly and quite lightly down towards 100 km/h, and we should be down to 100 km/h within, I think, 200 to 300 meters of the start of the speed limit. Now down to 100 km/h, so the train will maintain that speed until the speed limit increases. Now going to cross some points over towards the left, and then once we've crossed the point shortly after that, the speed limit will be going back up to 200 km/h. The speed limit has now jumped back up to 200 km/h, so the train is now accelerating up towards that. And we're now coming up on Bitterfeld station with around 32.5 kilometers to go, or around 20 miles to go, to Leipzig. An upcoming 80 km/h speed limit has now activated on the LZB system. This is a speed limit that the train doesn't quite slow down for in time. So what I'm going to do is, as we reach the braking point for that speed limit, I'm going to manually brake the train harder than the system would to ensure that we do slow down to 80 km/h in time. We're now passing Petersroda station. We'll shortly be coming up on the braking point for the 80 km/h speed limit, so we'll just reach that now. I've just idled the power, and now I'm manually applying the brakes up towards a full service brake application to try and ensure that our speed comes off quick enough. We will be passing through one more station just before the speed limit comes into force, which is at Berlin, and the speed limit comes into force literally just as we've passed through the platform at Berlin station. Our speed is coming off quite nicely here. We are now coming up on Berlin station. I am going to reduce the braking in a moment, as I feel we are slowing down maybe slightly too quick. I just pulled the braking back by one step. Now entering the platform at around 90 km/h, and I'm reducing the braking further. And the speed limit comes into force, as I said, just at the end of the platform here. We are now doing 80 km/h in time, and the speed limit has now come into force. At this point I can now apply a little bit of power. In fact, I can put the power handle all the way back up, as the speed limit will be changing again shortly, back up to 160 and then 200 km/h, and the train will accelerate itself up to these new speed limits. So in a moment we're just going to cross a point and go back onto the right-hand track, and then we can start accelerating once again as the speed limits increase. And then we've got a short section at 200 km/h before we've got to start thinking about slowing down and preparing for arrival at Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. The speed limit has now jumped up to 160 km/h, so the train is now accelerating back up towards that. The speed limit has now jumped further, back up to 200 km/h, and a 160 km/h speed restriction has just activated on the LZB system. So we've now got around 9.3 kilometers to go to that speed change. The station we just passed through was Sudkreuz station, with 16 kilometers to go to Leipzig. We are now passing Rackwitz station. The train has now begun to brake for the upcoming 160 km/h speed limit, so we will be down to that speed in time. In a little while now we're going to be coming off the LZB system and back onto the PZB signalling system. And so I've got to prepare for that as we get closer to the end of the LZB section. There will be a light that will come on the dashboard indicating that we are reaching the end. So we're now down to 160 km/h in time here. What I'm looking out for now is a long overbridge which will be coming up in a short while. At that point we've got 2 kilometers to go to an upcoming 120 km/h speed limit, and I will have to slow down for that speed limit myself, as once we hit that 120 then we are in the PZB section. So the long overbridge is the next bridge that we pass under in a second. At this point I'm now just going to idle the power and allow the train to coast along here. Coming up in a moment will be Leipzig Fair station. At Leipzig Fair I'm then going to start braking for the upcoming 120 km/h speed limit. The LZB end light has now come on, indicating that we are reaching the end of LZB signalling. I'm now going to start applying the brakes for the upcoming 120 speed limit. We've now left LZB control, so the AFB bug there at the outside of the speedometer jumped all of the way to its highest setting due to the position that I had the lever in. So I'm now just adjusting that down to 120 km/h at this point. So we're now down to 120 km/h in time. Now coming up shortly is a rather troublesome signal. I'm going to have to acknowledge a PZB alert indicating that the speed limit's going to be dropping to 80 km/h. Sometimes when I've attempted to pass this signal, it just triggers the emergency brakes even though I'm trying to acknowledge the PZB, and other times it just applies the emergency brakes thinking I'm not slowing down quickly enough for the upcoming 80 km/h speed limit. So I'm hoping to get past this signal without the emergency brakes triggering, and I'm going to apply the brakes to slow down to 80 km/h very quickly. In fact, I've already got the brakes on before we're passing the signal here. I'm going to keep pressing the PZB acknowledge button. In fact, it seems that the signalling system has somehow bugged out and switched itself off. So I'm not quite sure what's happened there. I am going to continue to slow down for the 80 km/h speed limit. But yeah, I'm really not sure what's happened. I've not known that happen in Train Simulator before, where the signalling system switches itself off. So accordingly, we're not under PZB signalling. As far as the safety systems go, I'm purely driving this by following these signals without having to acknowledge any alarms. So I'm now down to 80 km/h. And at this signal here you can see there's a 4 on the bottom and 8 at the top. So that indicates that I need to be down to 40 km/h by the time we reach the next signal. So I'm just lightly braking to bring our speed down. Braking more to bring our speed down towards 40 km/h in time for the next signal, which I believe is coming up shortly, just ahead. So we are now down to 40 kilometers per hour. I've just moved the speed set down to 40 to ensure that we don't break the speed limit and we can hold that speed. The speed limit comes into force at the yellow signal you can see just above us there. I've actually just turned on the signalling system now by pressing Control and Enter, and it seems that I was able to turn on the PZB. I didn't think that was possible while the train is moving, because I know you certainly can't turn it off while the train is moving. But the 85 lamp is now back on the dashboard. The only thing I'm thankful for is that with the bug where the PZB switched itself off, it did allow me to get past that troublesome signal without any issues. So we now have around 1 kilometer to go to Leipzig Hauptbahnhof station. And there's quite a few tracks here. I do remember the first time I saw Leipzig in simulation form was actually back in the days of Microsoft Train Simulator. There was a series of train simulator add-ons called the Pro Train series, and the second one in the Pro Train series, Pro Train 2, was the route from Leipzig through to Dresden. And I found it a very enjoyable route to drive. It was one of my favourite routes in Train Simulator for quite some time, and I'd actually really like to see that simulated in the current generation Train Simulator, or even indeed in Train Sim World, as ultimately I'm sure there's going to be some German add-ons made for the Train Sim World program. At this point I'm now idling the power, as I don't feel that we need any more power at this point. We should be able to just coast into the station quite nicely. Arrival here at Leipzig, I need to stop as close to the buffer stops at the end of the platform as possible to try and fit as much of the train in as possible. Certainly don't want any of the trains sticking out the other end of the platform if it can be avoided. So I'm just fanning the brakes by going between release and step 1 to try and bring us to a more gentle stop here. I'm aiming to stop just after the red marker has disappeared. And so we should now be stopping in just about the right place. And here we are, arrival at Leipzig Hauptbahnhof. Thank you very much for watching this video. I very much hope that you've enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that for the latest channel updates you can find me on Facebook, and the link to my Facebook page is in the description of this video. And if you would like to sponsor anything towards my channel and the work that I'm doing, then please visit my Patreon page for more information, and the link to my Patreon page is also in the description of this video. Once again, thank you for watching.